This video, we'll look at the conjunction or the connection between scarcity, the reptilian brain, competency, and sociopathic behavior. So how do these fit together? Well, the first correlation is between competency and abundance. The more competent an individual is, the more competent a culture is, the more abundant it is. And this is obvious because every human being in the history of humanity has wanted to feel sustainably better and wanted to avoid feeling chronically worse. So that's the desire, that's the goal. So what's missing is competency. You have the desire and you don't have the skill to realize the desire, which creates pain. Now, pain shows up most of all in the empathic brain. When you have a low competency culture, the part that feels the most pain is the human brain, which is the empathic brain, which has all the mirror neurons to connect to everyone else who's suffering, because the culture lacks the competency to meet the basic needs of its people. What are the basic needs? Well, they're all, the same needs that every human in history has had: to survive, to feel secure in that survival, to experience love and belonging, to develop self-esteem, the earned love and respect for oneself, to discover one's abilities, to bring those abilities meaningfully into the world and create abundance, and then become part of something bigger than oneself, to transcend by identifying with a family, a culture, an ecological movement, a peace and justice movement, a religious, a sense of the oneness of all that is, to identify, which is to orient one's pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being with something bigger than the limited, isolated ego that is the most lonely thing that we know. The most lonely part of us is the part of us that feels separate from everything and everyone. I'm different. I don't belong. But when we become part of something bigger than ourselves, in service to an idea, it could be the religion of science, the exploration and organizing of patterns, or the religion of love, to find the thread that connects all things and pursues well-being for something bigger than oneself. Understand ecology and our role in it, and how to participate in coming back to balance. These are the needs that every human being has. And a culture or cult that is competent at meeting the needs of its people creates high levels of abundance. So there's a connection between abundance and competence. There's also a connection between abundance and pain, because the less abundance you have, the more scarcity you have, the more pain you have. Now you think of the most basic needs of breathing and eating. Well, if somebody covers your access to breathing, you rapidly experience more pain and then death. If someone covers your ability to experience love and belonging as a as a part of a social mammalian species, one very quickly experiences pain, and certainly in infancy, without any human contact, death. So with scarcity comes pain. Now, when the pain gets too big, when the pain, you have a continuum of pain, up here you have unbearable, intolerable pain. Down here you have, little discomfort. It's a continuum. Somewhere on this continuum, every single human being dissociates from their empathic brain. Now, what remains is the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain has a primary function of surviving in a sociopathic environment. So why is the environment sociopathic? Well, it's self-evident because you're in pain. If the environment is social, integrative, empathic, then your pain doesn't reach the unbearable level. You see, if you're surrounded by people who are so sociopathic that your pain started here, went up, and over a period of X number of years, just went up, and then the last straw, right? The last little bit, and now you cannot deal with that level of pain. In order for that to have happened, first of all, you have to be raised in a culture that doesn't teach you how to deal with pain. If you knew how to deal with pain, it probably wouldn't keep rising month after month, year after year, because you'd know how to respond to it. You'd know how to identify it. You'd know how to find a remedy, and you'd be able to look around you and ask for help. I'm missing love and belonging. I'm feeling more and more lonely, more and more isolated, more and more meaningless. I'm suffocating. I don't have love and belonging in my life, and my biology is organized for love and belonging. I need it. So, who's going to help me? Now, in an empathic culture, the two questions are who is in the most pain and how can we help? Those are the guiding lights of an empathic culture. Now, if your pain keeps growing and the culture's response is, please hide that pain because we don't want to help you. Now, why don't they want to help you? It's not fun being around people in pain, number one. It's not fun becoming sociopathic, number two. So why are they not wanting to help when it is not fun to turn away from another human being? You have to shut off a part of your own brain because your mirror neurons otherwise are going to say, ding, 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 you're in pain because they're in pain. You're in pain because they're in pain, and they're in pain because nobody will help them. Nobody who knows what they are doing will help them, so they're in pain. You have to kill off a part of your own brain. Like, I don't want to deal with that. You have to partition that. That's not fun. What's fun is, oh, let's help them. And then, we feel closer, we feel more of a community, and there's less pain. That's fun. So, who chooses unnecessary suffering? Incompetent people, right? It's not competent. You want to feel good. You don't want to feel bad. So if you are sustaining misery in yourself and those around you, you are incompetent at your primary objective, which is to facilitate sustainable well-being. And so there is a link between chronic pain and incompetence. There's also a link between chronic pain and escalating pain and dissociating from the empathic brain. Because the empathic brain is the brain in oneself and in the other that says, who's in the most pain? How can we help? This is our issue. Why? Because that's what empathy is. Empathy says that your pain is as important as my pain. Why? Because I care about you, number one. because we're part of the same species. We're part of the same ecology. Number 2, empathy is on a path towards healing. But empathy blended with incompetence is excruciatingly painful. The only empathy that is joyful is empathy blended with competence. So competency is the core thing. Now, it's not hard to understand why we're incompetent psychologically, relationally, and traumatically. Emotionally, we're incompetent. It's not hard. You start expressing feelings, and your parents tell you that that's bad. They don't explain why. That would be competent. In a parentally illiterate culture, your parents will abuse you. They don't explain why, other than that you're bad, and project their issues on you, because that would be competent. You go to school and you express your feelings the way your parents did to you. You don't like what your friend is doing, so you hit them. Your parents didn't like what you were doing, so they hit you, right? And that's bad. But that's all you get, is your feelings are bad. You don't get a single formal hour of emotional training. You don't get to study psychology. You don't practice communication skills. You can go cradle to grave. Parenting, kindergarten, middle school, high school, college, long career, and then death. You can get married. You can have kids, all without a single hour of emotional literacy, without a single science-based hour of relational literacy, without a single hour of traumatic literacy, which is the biology of intense feelings, and with tons of misinformation, shame, and trauma that is called love. You can get cross-wired, but you can't get uncrossed in a dysfunctional culture that will not study feelings, that will not study marriage, that will not study communication, that will not study empathy, and that will not teach our children. So where the incompetence comes from is obvious. But, the last piece in the link is that someone who dissociates from their empathic brain because it gets too painful in a sociopathic environment to be empathic. Someone who dissociates from their empathic brain dissociates from their humanity. What we call a human being rather than a wolf is the empathic brain. So when you are surrounded by sociopaths who are too incompetent to respond to their own and your pain, you will descend into a reptilian state, a fight what is smaller than you, because there's scarcity and you need the resources. Run from what is bigger than you, because you're in a sociopathic environment and you can't win. And freeze or please if neither of those are available. Meaning you may need to please your abuser because you can't run and you can't win a fight. And so, how can I help you? Oh, I'm so sorry. I offended. I'm so sorry. Did I interrupt you hitting me? Please, I do apologize. I'm bad, right? Carry on. Hit me again, right? I'm sorry for annoying you, right? Anything else I can do for you, Mr. Abuser? How can I please my abuser? Because I can't run and I can't win a fight. And I need human beings. We're a social mammalian species, so we need, to collaborate in some way. So that becomes the default mechanism. Now, reptiles are driven by fear of pain that is endemic because there's a low level of competency. That's the connection. So what does it take to lift into our humanity? What does it take to ascend into our humanness? It takes access to empathy. Now, if you want to know if you're an empathic person, if you want to know if the people around you are an empathic people, if the culture you're in is empathic, you look at how closely are they looking for the people in the most pain and how helpful and competent they are at responding to them. Who's in the most pain? How can we help? Not we're going to help you. We're going to get you off the streets. We're going to do this. We're going to take you away from your family. We're going to do this. No, how can we help? How can we help? It takes tremendous competency and confidence to ask that question when somebody's in pain. And if someone says, well, I'd like this and this, that would help, then you come face to face with your competency, with the scarcity created by incompetency. Yeah, that would help, but I don't know how to do that. Yes, it would help, but I don't have the energy to do that. Yes, that would help, but I am afraid that if I give you my scarce resources, there won't be enough for me. I could give you my money and my time and this, but then I'm afraid that I would be on the streets myself in a scarcity-oriented culture. So humanity comes with competency. Competency leads to abundance. Abundance leads to the cessation of pain. The cessation of pain leads to the thawing of the icicles that trigger and activate the reptilian brain, that remind it of its need for predominance, and begin to open the flower of empathy. Apple trees lose their leaves in the fall because the frost, the snow will strip the branches, will break the branches if the leaves remain on the trees. Because the cold weather can be too harsh. 10 below zero, 2 feet of snow. For an apple tree, they drop their leaves because they cannot sustain them. They go inward to protect the core life pattern. And they wait until the temperature thaws. They wait, and they wait, and they wait. And then spring comes, and the temperature warms, the snow melts. Water that was caught up in the snow melts. The water returns to the soil. Sap rises with the warming temperature. And at a certain point when the risk of frost has passed, because if the apple blossom blooms too quickly, this in a human being can happen with a psychedelic flowering, a chemical opening of portions of the psyche in the brain that are empathic and transcendent. But they're opening in a February storm. And a few hours after the heat of the chemical subsides, a bloom has taken place. A cherry bud has opened in January in 3 feet of snow, and it is quickly frozen and falls to the ground. And there is no crop that year. There's a loss of a crop because the bud happened out of sync with the ecology. The bud happened too soon. And so one of the principles behind this is you cannot become empathic alone. When one person enters the empathic state, surrounded by incompetence, profound pain, and scarcity. All of the pain that nobody else is able and willing to feel rushes into the mirror neurons of the person willing to feel. And it becomes too much. The frost hits the consciousness like a bed of nails. And the empathic brain shuts down because there's too much grief, there's too much sorrow at the humanity that is lost, the humanity that is violated. It's too much grief for one person to carry alone. And in a high pain, high incompetency culture, the person that enters the empathic state and feels the pain of the group is often scapegoated, stonewalled, stoned out of the circle, because the circle is not ready for that amount of pain. The circle doesn't want to feel that amount of grief because it doesn't know what to do with it, because it's incompetent. Christ is the Christian metaphor, the Christian archetype for the movement from the sociopathic and reptilian brain of might makes right, which is the law of the reptile. Might makes right. If you win, you were right. As a reptile, that is correct. To the human domain of the empathic brain, where the king, where the queen, where the Christ is the one who washes and serves the disciples, where it's a flip because the biggest T-Rex attacks and kills and consumes the energy of that which is smaller than it. That's the reptile. But in the empathic brain, the question is, who's in the most pain? How can I help? How can we help? And the person that asks that question is the king, is the queen, is the leader, is the one with the most power, is the alpha. So the alpha has moved from consuming and preying on that which is most vulnerable and sensitive to feeding that which is most vulnerable and most sensitive. Now that is a movement towards empathy. That is a movement towards competency. But it is also a movement towards abundance. Because with empathy comes caring, comes attunement, comes service. Christ, in the metaphor, is the highest of the high, which in a chauvinistic culture has to be a male, but in a transcendent culture is that which is more than, that is both feminine and masculine, and that which is more than feminine and masculine combined, the unity before the knowledge of good and evil, which is before the universe was split into half, two halves, right? The universe was cut in two with the knowledge of good and evil. With language, basically. We take the uninterrupted ecology of the one, we cut it into two, and now you have a male and a female and all of that. Well, the one is more than its parts. Synergy. The ecology is always greater than the sum of its parts. A body is more than just a random assortment of fingernails and fingers and stuff. It is a synergy, acting as a whole. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so in a healthier, less chauvinistic paradigm, it is the one that is the most, that serves the one that is the least. When there's empathy and when there's competence, there is abundance. And when there is abundance, it's fun. You love because it's more fun than it is to hate. You give because it's more fun than it is to hoard when there is abundance. When there's scarcity, it's about giving up so that someone else has. You suffer. The suffering just transfers. But why is there suffering? Because there's scarcity. If everyone's a billionaire, that's more money than anyone can possibly spend in a lifetime. And if everyone is a billionaire, if someone says, could you loan me 10? Of course. Have 100. Have 1,000,000. I've got thousands and thousands of, have 100,000, here. There's no hoarding because there's no fear. And there's no fear because there's no pain. There's no pain because there's no scarcity. And there's no scarcity because there's no incompetence. And there's no incompetence because there's no ignorance. Now, how do you solve ignorance? How do you solve traumatic illiteracy? Well, it just takes 30 hours to study trauma. Read the Body Keeps the Score as a start, right? What does it take to heal the pain of loneliness? Well, some books about it. There are different cultures on the planet that are much less lonely than, for example, American or Russian cultures, which are very sociopathic. And, when it comes to deep, heartfelt union, a sense of going beyond the individual. You go to a culture that's warmer. You learn the art of friendship. Well, I couldn't do that. I'm busy watching TV, right? That's an anesthetic. So highly incompetent cultures do not know how to solve their pain, so they numb it with addictive, compulsive, media consumption, drugs, or whatever it is, to numb the pain that we don't have the competency to deal with. How do we develop the competency? We have to understand that incompetency is a dis-ease, that ignorance is a dis-ease, and that there is knowledge to be found. The community 10xliving.org is a recipe for increasing knowledge, healing ignorance, pain, and creating superabundance, healing scarcity, creating superabundance. That takes competency. Competency for other people to open to it, to change and enter it. Competency for somebody to offer it. That's the link. Pain is born of scarcity. Scarcity is born of ignorance and incompetence. Ignorance and incompetence is part of instinct in the reptilian brain. Trustworthiness is competency. When somebody takes care of women and children first in our version of that, competently, trust goes up. When trust goes up, empathy goes up. When empathy goes up, cooperation goes up. When cooperation with competence goes up, abundance goes up, and the cycle continues, and the cycle continues. Thanks for joining me on this exploration. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.